All right, can you guys hear me? All right. I just brought this box up because I just found it. I look nothing like. She is enjoying that experience. I'm going to be adjusting this quite a bit, so I apologize. Good? It's good image. What? No. I'm sorry. No, I'll be honest. This feels really cool. So I shouldn't complain. I'm sorry. All right. My name is Brad Franklin. I'm the North American Director of the Elisha Foundation, and that was a little video about one of our two main ministries. So one of our main ministries is we do retreats for families with kids with disabilities. So we partner with churches to put on these weekend-long retreats. We bring the entire family, parents, kids with disabilities, kids without, and it's Thursday through Sunday. We bring in a guest speaker who's raised his own child with disability, so he can kind of speak into the successes that come along with it, also the very real struggles that come along with it too, but just tying it back into the gospel and the common hope that we all have in Christ. And so that's a big part of what we do. The other thing we do is we do disability ministry trainings for churches. We either want to start their own disability ministry or really just want to shore up their Sunday school programming, youth group, adult programming to make it more inclusive for people with disabilities. My background is, so I've been with the Life Foundation for a little over 3 years. Prior to that, I was a high school special ed teacher for 5 years. I got my master's in special ed, did my undergrad work in special ed and psychology, and had a lot of different jobs in the field of disability along the way. And I share that not to kind of be like, oh wow, look at me and my experience. More just I thought it'd be important to prove to you guys that I'm in my 30s. I'm not like some well-dressed teenager that showed up. I spoke at this thing last week, and right before I started, this guy came to me and said, oh, I thought we were getting somebody with a little more experience. And I was like, oh, that's nowhere near a compliment, but thanks. So I just want to start off with that, a little bit about me. A little bit about tonight, what I'm going to share, what I was asked to share, is more along the disability ministry training side of things. So we do these day-long trainings for churches. They're free for churches. And again, churches who either want to start their own ministry, maybe start a respite night program, or really just want help day to day, right? Sunday to Sunday. How can we serve our kids? How can we serve youth and adults better within our church? And so the way our trainings usually look, they're day-long trainings, and they start with just talking about disability in the gospel. The Bible points to people with disabilities being one of the most important members of the church, and we've talked about that today quite a few times, which is great. So we usually start off with that, talk about kind of approaching disability, the right mindset to have when you're ministering to people with disabilities. And then we talk about specific disabilities, so the most common disabilities that you guys will see in your ministries. And then we really backload it with just the concrete tools and strategies to use inside your classrooms and inside your ministries when you're ministering to people with disabilities. And so tonight I was asked to kind of share a really abridged version of that, which I'm really excited to do. And so tonight's going to be more of the what we do right now inside of our classrooms. So what are some good strategies and tools to use? So since this is a shortened version, and since after this, and I'm gonna, we're starting a little bit later. After this, we're doing a Q&A with a couple people with disabilities that come up here and do a Q&A, which is great, which is way better than a Q&A that I would do, I'll tell you. So if you guys do have any questions come up during this training, so my card, I have a big stack of cards over there. And we say this during our trainings too. Our trainings are interactive for sure, but at the same time, a lot of questions that pop up are very kid specific, right? Well, I have a kid that goes to my church and he does these things, and without the backstory, it's really hard to answer that question. So if any questions pop up, grab my card, shoot me an email, and we'll for sure connect that way, okay? I want to just kind of dive right in real quick to, I'll do it, sure, let's do it. All right, so I'm going to try to go quick because we do have a lot and a little bit of time, but I do want to tell you, so with Life Foundation, you saw a big thing for us is ministering to the entire family, right? To the kids for sure, but to the siblings, absolutely. That's actually a place near and dear to my heart. My wife has a sister with autism, and oftentimes when you're a sibling of disability, kind of attention falls by the wayside. So certainly serving them and absolutely the parents as well. So this training used to be specifically for churches who wanted to start a respite night, right? So respite night meaning parents would drop their kids with and without disabilities off at the church and then go have a date night, right, or something like that. Or sometimes churches would organize it where they drop their kids off and then they would go and it'd be kind of a parent time where parents could talk and spend time talking about their shared experience raising a child with disability. So we transitioned away from doing it specifically for respite night and more for, again, what can we do Sunday to Sunday. But we keep this in our training just kind of as a reminder of the importance of our work when we're ministering specifically to kids with disabilities. I'm going to read it real quick. It says, life raising someone with special needs is taxing. Certain aspects of the parenting effort are relentless in nature. No let-up, constant concern, and difficult effort. Physical exhaustion from long days and nights, sometimes around-the-clock care. Emotional strain from developmental setbacks or the strain of people's hurtful comments and perceptions of your child. Spiritual weakness due to lack of facilitation by the church. All of these symptoms are common to these families. They need respite. And then furthermore, again, this isn't, that's right. I need to look at the one on my left, not the right. This is why you're here. Thanks for spotting me, CJ. This is great. This is great. A recent study conducted by the National Alliance for Caregiving. So the greatest need identified for parents raising someone with a disability was respite. So they surveyed a ton of families and asked, what is your guys' biggest need? And what they thought they were going to hear was physical therapists, occupational therapists coming to my house, right? Maybe behavior therapists helping, right? But 68 of the parents that were surveyed declared respite night as a critical need, right? So respite was number one, and it more than tripled the likes of other desired needs like behavior consultation or environmental modifications. So bottom line, whether it is doing a respite night once a month or whether it is just Sunday school, right, providing an hour and a half for the parents to go and worship together, it's a simple yet a profound way to make a huge impact in the lives of these families. So, approaching disability. Before I really talk about kind of the concrete tools and strategies to use inside the classroom ministries, I think it's great just to talk about the mindset to have when approaching disability. So first of all, it truly is ministering to people with disabilities, right? Not just working with them, right? I think that's kind of a common thing that can happen is seeing it almost like a glorified daycare in a sense, right? But no, absolutely, we're sharing the gospel to everybody, right? Sharing the message to everybody. So it's actually ministering to people with disabilities, right? And then 1 Corinthians 12, having that mindset, which Becky touched on a bit today, right? Of, we're all important members of the body of Christ. Some of the eyes, some of the ears, some of the nose, some of the mouth, but we're all important members, and Christ placed each part of the body exactly as he chose to, right? And he put disability in the body. That it's needed, right? Otherwise, Christ wouldn't put it in the body. Then lastly, again, kind of thinking more of the spiritual, biblical side of things, there's the parable of the great banquet. Luke 14 through 21. In fact, where's Rachel? Somewhere. Hey, Rachel, isn't this a big Johnny and Friends thing, the Luke 14 mandate? And then they say, yeah, the Luke 14 mandate, right? So Luke 14:21 says, go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame. So this is when it's a parable and a man is telling his servant who to invite to his dinner. He's got this big fancy dinner, who to invite. And he says, go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. Now the really interesting thing about this verse is that obviously in the Bible there are a lot of commands, right? There's the 10 Commandments, there are a bunch of other things to do and not to do. So the words go out are in the Bible a ton. There's only one time in the Bible though where it says go out quickly. Only one time. And this is the exact time when it says go into the streets and alleys of town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame, right? So that shows the sense of urgency that we have as a church. It's biblical, the sense of urgency that we need, right, to be inclusive and bring in everybody. And now a little bit more about kind of shifting the mindset. Disability, right, doesn't mean inability. Raise your hand if you've heard of, there was this, the Special Olympics came up with this kind of slogan and this campaign 10, 15 years ago called Spread the Word to End the Word. Anybody remember that, hear about that, right? Okay, a couple people, great. So Spread the Word to End the Word was all about the R word, right? So it's getting the word retard out of the vernacular, mainly high school kids, middle school kids who kind of use it as slang. But it was such a successful campaign that they ran that it actually was eradicated from medical journals. So it's no longer called mental retardation, but it's now intellectual disability, right? Which is exciting, it's great. I think what happened is that Special Olympics got a little bit ahead of themselves, and they were like, all right, so we just changed the R word. we're going to change the word disability. And they started a new campaign to try to make the word diffability a thing. And it didn't happen, mainly because you sound like Daffy Duck when you say it. But I really like their idea behind it, right? Different abilities, right? People learn differently, right? People have body parts that work differently, right? It's different abilities. I love it. One of my favorite quotes by Albert Einstein: "Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to live its whole life believing that it's stupid." Right? And that's kind of our role, like our exciting role as people who get to provide disability ministry, right? Is, okay, how do we figure out how to make this child, make this adult, feel successful, right? How do we climb this tree? Another interesting way to think about it is disability as a social construct. So this is taken from the preamble to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The quote says, "Disability is an evolving concept, results from attitudinal and environmental barriers that hinder full and effective participation in society." So it's essentially saying that it's society who deemed what's a disability and what's not, but it really has to do with access. And an example of this would be the invention of eyeglasses, right? So before eyeglasses were invented, imagine how debilitating of a disability being farsighted or nearsighted was, right? Probably couldn't do a lot of things, right? Now I look around and it's probably over 50% actually have glasses, right? And you probably wouldn't consider that a disability, right? And that's more of an access piece. One of the best ways, though, to encapsulate the philosophy on how to approach disability is examining the concept of people first language. Partially because of time, and partially because Becky touched on it a little bit today. I'm going to kind of skip through that. But people first language is the idea of putting the person before the disability, right? And so the whole, again, we don't need to talk about like because as Becky touched on today, some people are all about people first language, some people are not. And I get it. I get both of those, absolutely. But the idea behind people first language is all about seeing the person first before seeing the disability, understanding the person as a person and seeing everything else too, okay? So disability describes what a person has, not who a person is. So to give you a concrete example of that, I had a cold last week, right? People didn't call me Cold Brad or that cold guy, right? Not to my face, not that I know of, right? Because that's just, Brad has a cold, right? Among other things. So, wow, I sped through that really well. All right, okay, we got time now. Okay, great. So, without further ado, top 5 strategies for ministering to people with disabilities. So number 1, Jesus and hospitality. And yes, I cheated and I've combined a couple, so just deal with it, okay? Jesus and hospitality. Number 2, routine. Number 3, we're going to talk about the importance of communication. Number 4, structure and differentiation. And then number 5, consistency and anticipation, okay? So 2 caveats though before we get started. Number 1, every individual is different, right? I think like people with disabilities are different, people without disabilities are different, every individual is different, right? And so when we speak, when we talk about these different instructional strategies and tools, these research-based instructional strategies and tools, we're speaking in generalities here, right? Because what works for some people is not going to work for others. That's with people with disabilities and without. I would argue that a lot of these strategies are great for kids without disabilities, great for adults without disabilities too, right? So we're talking in generalities, that's number 1. Number 2 is that we can do trainings, right? We can be here tonight. You guys can do the 5-hour Life Foundation training and feel prepared, right? And then you can go to the situation and, the saying goes, even the best laid plans, right? And things can just go awry, and that's okay, right? And example I usually give of that, which I don't know why I do because it makes myself look terrible, but I'm going to give it anyway. So my first year of teaching, I had a good first month, all right? I was nailing it as a teacher. I had it all figured out. I taught a science unit the first month, and we did a couple really fun experiments. We did one thing, we had a fish tank filled with water, and we dropped a bunch of objects in there to see if you could sink, if it would sink or float. And my kids were having a great time, and I was just the world's best teacher. I was checking the mail every day, like, when is this Teacher of the Year award going to come? It never did. And so the science unit ended. I was driving to school one morning, which is really hard to do because I was driving with one hand and patting myself on the back with the other. And I thought to myself, you know what, to wrap up this science unit, let's just do something about planets, right? I don't need to, I don't need to think about a whole lot. I'm gonna explain to them how there's the sun, and then there are the planets around them, and they orbit, and it's gonna be great. So that was my plan. I was gonna teach them about planets. And I walked into the classroom. I explained the activity. The activity was going to be, I'm going to be the sun, because at that point everything revolved around me. Anyway, I'm going to be the sun. I'm going to assign each student a planet. And when I say go, I'm going to stand on a chair, and students, you guys are going to get around me in order, and I'm going to say go, and you guys are going to orbit around me, and that's going to show you how orbit works, and it's going to be great. And as I'm explaining it, so I have peer tutors in my classroom, so kids without disabilities who would be in there and work with my kids with disabilities. As I'm explaining it, like, everybody was confused. My students look confused, my peer tutors are confused, my fellow staff members look confused. I thought it was a look of like, wow, we are in the presence of one of the best teachers. How fortunate are we? That was not it. Nobody knew what to do. So I stood on the chair, got everybody in order, said go, and then just madness ensued. I mean, like, Mars ran out the door, Venus went in the corner, started to cry. There was like one planet bouncing back and forth. I don't know what planet that does this, but there was one planet just doing this back and forth. And I'm like standing on a chair in the middle of my classroom with just a bird's eye view of everything crumbling to the ground, right? And you know what? That was okay. It was okay. You know, we didn't learn much about planets that day, but I learned something that day, and then we moved on. I learned how to better prepare, and we moved on. So even best laid plans, we can feel prepared, we can set everything up just right, and then it's just maybe not going to happen that day. And that's okay. That's all right. We just got to get messy, okay? All right, so number one, Jesus and hospitality. So we did touch on this. Ruben did a great job with this, touching on kind of the theological side of things. I want to touch on a little bit too. Number one, Jesus, God created everybody in His image, right? Imago Dei, created everybody in His image. And love is the direct result of that, right? So I had a great chat with my friend Mario over here, talking about kind of the sometimes weird balance between serving out of love versus out of pity that can happen sometimes, right? But when we are with people with disabilities, when we're ministering to and serving people with disabilities, I don't know how we can serve out of pity someone who's A, made in the image of God, but B, someone who's so indispensable to the church, right? We talk about 1 Corinthians 12, somebody who's so indispensable and so valued and so loved by the Lord. We can't serve out of pity. We serve out of love, but also out of necessity because we need them in our congregation and in our lives. So number one, that understanding. Number two, the understanding that everybody has value in Christ. So there's this pastor up in Toronto, and he has a son with Williams syndrome. He gives this example to his congregation every now and then. He asks for a $100 bill, or whatever the exchange rate is in Canada, right? And holds it up and says, "Who wants this $100 bill?" And everybody raises their hand. See, right there, Christopher wants that $100 bill. All right, Christopher, I'm sorry, I don't have it. I'm sorry. So then he takes that $100 bill, he crumples it up, holds it back up, says, "Who wants this $100 bill?" And everybody raises their hand. All right, they're going to hand, right? Then he takes that crumpled up $100 bill, puts it on the ground, steps on it, squishes it, picks it back up, and says, "Who wants this $100 bill?" And everybody raises their hand, right? Everybody has value. Everybody has value in Christ. And then lastly, Jesus Christ placed tremendous value on people with disabilities. And as a church body, we need to do the same. So hospitality, I kind of alluded to this last night. Here are some statistics. First two show us that we got a little bit of work to do. Okay, number one, 20% of the population has a disability. Okay, that's the most recent stat. 20% of the population has a disability. When we look at our congregations, we don't see 20%, right? Now that's not necessarily, that's not an intentional move by the church, right? But that's just reality, right? That's every church. We don't see 20%. And then furthermore, I put an asterisk here because there have been a few different studies and surveys on believing families who have kids with disabilities. And so this is kind of the range that each survey gives. But the range is 50% to 80% of unchurched Christians impacted by disability. 50 to 80%. I don't care what side of the range is right. Those are big numbers, right? Right? That at least 50% of families don't go to church, right? For one reason or another. So the good news is that in a survey conducted of over 400 church-going families, 90% of them cited that the most helpful support to them is a welcoming attitude. Right? It's hospitality. And this is stuff that I think Becky and Ruben did a great job touching. It's hospitality. So here's some examples. Among the welcoming church behaviors, they said approaching a family and asking what supports they need. Right? Speaking directly to the individual with disabilities and not the caretaker. Offering to sit with them. Calling and checking in when they're absent. Anyone can do these things, right? That's the exciting part for us, I feel like. That's exciting, right? So we have these numbers, right? 50-80% of unchurched Christians impacted by disability, but this shows 90% just want to start with a welcoming attitude, right? Coming in and just asking questions. How can we best support you, right? We want you here. How can we best support you, right? We can do these things. Okay. Number 2, routine. So, predictability is huge for most individuals with disabilities. And again, I'd argue for most people without disabilities as well, predictability is important, right? Number 1, because of comfort. So, like sensory needs, right? So, in our full trainings, we talk about specific disabilities, and with some specific disabilities come certain sensory needs, right? So, like sensory needs that some people with disabilities have, a break in routine can cause a huge level of discomfort. And this discomfort can actually lead to it's a real physiological response that happens during transitions, and this can lead to actual physical discomfort. So, because of that, transitions can be very difficult for many individuals with disabilities, right? And that can be a gigantic transition, like mom and dad just split up, and now I'm living in different houses, right? And that can even be a small transition, like we're in Sunday school and we're moving from Lego time to story time, right? Big or small, transitions can cause a very real physiological response inside of the body of the individual with disability. So, a couple different strategies. Oh, they already popped up. How about that? A couple different strategies around that, because all these that we're presenting are proactive strategies. Number 1 would be presenting a schedule. So presenting a schedule ahead of time so everybody knows what's coming first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, right? So it's helpful for a lot of individuals with disabilities and a lot of individuals without to present visual schedules, right? Because a lot of people are visual learners. So providing a visual schedule, whether that's a whole class schedule, so maybe you're in Sunday school class and you're going over, okay, so first it's going to be free play, then we're going to do story time, then we're doing craft time, or whether it's an individual schedule. Sometimes individuals need more individual attention and talking about what's going to happen first, second, third, or fourth. So here's an example of a couple whole group visual schedules. One I plucked from an old teacher friend of mine. So this is a visual whole group schedule. It showed students what they were going to do first, second, third, and fourth. So first they got there and they did independent work, then they were going to do calendar, then they did activity. You can see how there's pictures of all these, which is really, really helpful, makes it even more visual, right? And also, so the way that the teacher would do it is he would lay out, before class started, he'd tell them one by one, here's what we're doing. Don't ask me what Go Noodle is, but I don't know. Maybe that's why I didn't get the Teacher of the Year award, because he was the Teacher of the Year. Okay, what is Go Noodle?
Go Noodle is it's a program you can log on. It's online, and they just have tons of videos for, exercise videos, music videos, literature videos.
Am I the only one that doesn't know this?
Yes, it's so awesome.
You want to teach this? Do you want to? Go. Okay. All right. That's good. Hey, now I learned something. Go Noodle. Okay, that's great. All right. This one was used more for Sunday school, right? So a visual schedule. First doing craft and then Bible study. Then we're going to walk in line, music, bathroom. So this is great because it's really, really broken down. These are specific steps. And that can be very, very helpful. A great thing about a whole class visual schedule is that it doesn't single anybody out, right? You can go through your visual schedule and you're not going to be like, all right, we're going to go through this visual schedule because Johnny needs it, right? No, you're just going through the entire visual schedule for the entire class. It's probably going to be helpful for a lot of kids that are in there, to be honest, right? Something I like here, they went a step further and they broke it down even further by saying, now we're doing this and then next we're going to do that. Although that should be upside down. All right, next one, individual visual schedule. So here's an example, a couple individual ones. So sometimes an individual may need a little bit more attention when it comes to transitions, and they may need you to break things down even further, right? Ruben mentioned the buddy system that they do at Imago, right? So we did a training with Imago. That's where Ruben is pastor at. Like a year before they started the buddy system. And this is one big thing that we hammered home, is that if you have a buddy system and a one-on-one, then you can really sit down with somebody and lay out, here's what's going to happen first, second, third, or fourth. And again, and that really helps by providing that level of comfort and predictability, right? So, wow, that is very big. So let's just do that one. Sign in next to your name, take things out of your backpack, go to locker and put things away, put key on hook. Again, that's really broken down into very specific steps, but oftentimes people need those very specific steps. What do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? Nice spin, Luke. All right, transitions, continuous transitions. Prepping ahead of a transition can be important, right? So if you know that a particular adult struggles when you change from one activity to another, letting them know before that change happens that it's going to happen can be really helpful. So there are two tools that you can use that can be really helpful as well. We'll talk about them on the next slide, so just stay with me for a minute. During a transition, coaching during a transition can be helpful as well, right? So using the example of going from Legos to story time. So if I have a child that I know struggles with that transition, then I would say, all right, buddy, so now we're going to get up. Very good. Okay, we're going to go ahead and walk. We're going to walk. Very good. We're going to head over. We're going to have a seat right here. That's great. So coaching them and letting them know exactly what you need to see can be very helpful. Sometimes it can be the opposite, though. Can anybody guess? Let's get interactive for a second. Anybody guess why that would be the opposite of helpful?
I don't want to like get out.
Sure, for sure, that definitely. And part of that does come from maybe that sensory overload, right? Talking too much, right? And we'll talk later on about how our language sometimes can be very concise and concrete. We'll talk about that. Providing a preferred activity or an item if you're transitioning to a non-preferred activity. So the best way to structure our classrooms or our ministry when considering the needs of everybody is considering doing a preferred activity followed by a non-preferred activity, followed by a preferred activity, followed by a non-preferred activity, right? So maybe the Legos is the preferred activity, maybe the story time is a non-preferred activity, right? So you have a child playing with Legos, that's great, they're excited, they know next is story time, maybe they're not as excited about that, but they know after that is craft time, and they're excited about that, right? So having that order, preferred, non-preferred, preferred, non-preferred is important. Providing just did that. Fidget or distraction. Trudy, you make those, right? Yeah, so fidgets can be really helpful as well. And then, so somebody holding a fidget as they transition from one thing to another, right? So back when I was a teacher, again, all the examples I give are me being a terrible teacher. Why did you ask me that? I don't know. So back when I was a teacher, I worked one-on-one with a kid during summer school. And we had a student who particularly struggled with transitions. And the first day I did not know that. And the first day we transitioned from doing classwork to going to the gym, and he ran as we were walking in there. He needs things to do, and so what he decided to do during that walk was run into the office and take a potted plant and throw it on the ground, and then run back into the hallway and go to the gym. And he just needed something to do. That was all. So the very next day we had a tennis ball, and he just played with the tennis ball. I just caught it up and down, very very coordinated. He caught it up and down, and that was it, right? So a fidget can be helpful during a transition. And then lastly, using time as a tool, or time, as I say in quotes, can be helpful transition as well. And I say time in quotes because I don't know if you guys realize this, but as adults, you can manipulate time, right? You can tell somebody there's 5 minutes left, but there's really 2, right? I did that all to you guys last night downstairs in the gym, right? And you didn't even notice, right? So I'm saying you can even manipulate time a little bit. Keeping a routine still allows us to minister, right? So we can still introduce new things as long as it's within that routine, right? That's a common question we have is, wait a second, so we need to do the same stories over and over? We need to do the same crafts over and over? Well, no, right? You're introducing a new story every time. You're introducing a new craft every time. But just on the schedule, it says story time, craft time. So that child, that youth, that adult knows this is what's coming. So here's the examples of the 2 transition tools that were on the last slide. So the first is a first-then board, right? So this can be used with the whole class. More commonly, though, used individually. It's just a T-chart, and it shows the individual or the class what is happening now, what's coming first, and then what's coming next, right? Which makes things very predictable, which is very important, right? So that says first reading and then Legos, right? So again, unpreferred activity probably, and then preferred activity after that. So if the child or the adult doing an unpreferred activity, they know, okay, well, I got this preferred activity coming next, right? So then literally what you do is once you switch on to Legos, then you erase everything, and then it's first Legos and then whatever the next activity is, right? It's really breaking it down to smaller steps and making it really, really predictable. Then the other example is a social story, right? So social story is most often used individually, but used to prep for a transition. If you know you have an individual who really struggles with a certain transition during their day, then you can help prep them ahead of time by literally going over what this transition is going to look like, right? So I'm going to read this one to you guys. I think you can kind of tell what this child struggled with last week. It says, moving to group time. It is time to clean up and move into our group time. After I clean up my toys, I will walk to the group rug and sit next to Beth with the rest of the kids. I will use my good listening ears during group time and I will keep my hands to myself. After I do a good job with my friends during group time, I can go back to playing games, right? So you sit down with the individual beforehand, and either you read it to them, or most often it's powerful if they read it themselves. Maybe their name is in it because you prepped this beforehand, right? And it gives them exactly, lets them know exactly what you want to see, right? What are the target behaviors that you want to see? Again, an example of me being a terrible teacher. This is a former student of mine. We had routines in my classroom. Every Monday was my journal Monday, or my weekend Monday, where we would journal about our weekend and we'd share with the class. Every Tuesday was Talking Tuesday, where we really work on our social skills. Every Wednesday was Jeans Wednesday. You had to wear jeans. It was a whole thing, don't ask. Thursday was Computer Thursday. We'd go work at the computer lab on Thursday. And then Friday was Fun Friday. In school, sometimes there's no school on Thursday or Friday, right? So there was one week where there was no school on Thursday or Friday, so we had computer lab on Wednesday, which is Jeans Wednesday, not computer lab Wednesday. And I did not prep my girl Katrina ahead of time, right? This is a transition, this is a change. And again, this is a smaller change to some, right? But this is a big deal. This is not, it's not Computer Thursday, right? It's Wednesday, right? So I didn't prep her ahead of time, so she refused to go down. So I spent 90 minutes with her in the classroom while everybody else was in the computer lab. But I'll tell you, it was really fun. We had a great time. We talked about One Direction, the band. But again, I didn't prep her ahead of time. So communication. When we do these trainings, I always kind of point out kind of the most important slides. I would say communication is one of the most important slides for sure. So there's something in the school systems called Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, PBIS. That's a big entire system, and we're not talking about like 99% of it. We're just talking about the 1% of it that talks about the way that we need to speak to individuals, right? And the way that we speak to individuals is by replacing problem behaviors. And so what I mean by that is framing wording by what you want the person to do, not what you want the person not to do. And this involves a shift in mindset for sure, right? Because examples of that are, saying walk instead of saying don't run, right? Or saying hands to self instead of saying, don't hit, right? Saying raise hand, raise your hand please, right? Instead of saying don't shut out, or don't shout out, right? I catch myself, you might have seen my 2-year-old run around in the kitchen area. I catch myself saying, hey, don't run. I catch myself doing that sometimes. It really takes a shift in mindset. But there's purpose and intentionality behind using PBIS in our language to individuals. Number one, it lets the person know what to do. Because sometimes, honestly, that's it. We just don't, don't run. Well, then what do I do? What do you mean don't run to the cafeteria? That's all I know, right? So telling them to walk explains exactly what the behavior that you want them to do, right? And then they understand it. And then it makes the replacement behavior clear for everyone else too. Number two, it lessens the opportunity to be devious, right? I'm in my 30s, like I said, believe me, trust me. But if somebody said, don't push that red button, I'm pushing the red button, right? So framing things in the positive lessens the opportunity to be devious. And then also, no is often a trigger word for people with disabilities, people without too. It's a self-determination thing. So, positive reinforcement. When we think about the way that we communicate, really to anybody, right? Again, a lot of this is it's across disability, but it's really to anybody. In the classroom, speaking classroom specific, but I think it should be life specific, they have something called the 4-to-1 praise model. So 4-to-1 praise model means you should say 4 good things about somebody, point out 4 specific things that they're doing well before you provide any one correction, right? Some studies show that it's actually even way more than 4-to-1. It's the more successful classroom, right? But not only that, again, another shift in mindset, because we need to be very specific about our praise, right? So we can't just say, hey, good job. Hey, nice work, right? Hey, you're doing great, right? But be specific about what they're doing well. Hey, you did a really good job raising your hand. I really appreciate that. Hey, I saw you share your toy with Johnny. That was really good, right? Hey, thank you so much for keeping your hands to yourself. That was great. Because again, that shows the child or the individual specifically what they're doing well, right? And in the world of positive reinforcement, that makes them want to do that behavior more, right? Sometimes we need to celebrate small successes though, right? Sometimes it might be really hard for an individual. It's really hard for us to feel like we can get to the 4 praises for one correction, right? But sometimes we still need to celebrate small successes. Hey, great job sitting down. Even if it's for a second, that child sits down, hey, you did a really good job sitting down. I really appreciate it. Because again, that shows the child, the behavior, the target behavior, what you want to see, right? And chances are that increases that behavior over time. Let's see, I'm going to skip through a couple things. Let's talk about, actually before we do that, just a survey. I've mentioned Bible bucks and like the last 3 trainings, and people are like, what is a Bible buck? Did anybody else grow up with Bible bucks, or did that just go to a weird church?
Like in Awana?
Yeah, like, hey, you were in a Bible buck.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh gosh, okay, okay, great, okay. Moving on. Sorry, that was more about me. That was not about you guys. That was a personal thing. All right, so in our communication, we need to be concise and concrete, right? For a couple different reasons. Number one, a lot of language, a lot of words can be overstimulating to a lot of people. Can be overstimulating, right? Number two, some individuals with disabilities, some individuals without, struggle with multi-step directions, right? So being clear and concise with our language helps kind of break things down one by one. And lastly, some individuals with disabilities can be very literal, right? Very literal. So an example, so some individuals with disabilities struggle with idioms, for example. One of my favorite students, he had this routine where he would use the restroom at school, but before he did, he would take his jacket off and put it down on the ground outside in the hallway, and then use the restroom, and then come back and put his jacket on, right? So one day he came to my classroom in a panic because his jacket was gone. He put his jacket down, did his routine, came back, jacket was gone, freaked out, didn't know what to do, and I said, hey, buddy, it's all right, just come check in with me every now and then, which I really should have specified, because it was like every 10 minutes for a while. Like, is my jacket here? And I was like, no, it wasn't here 10 minutes ago. It's not here now, right? But he checked in with me every 10, 15 minutes, is my jacket here? And couldn't find it, didn't know where it was. End of the day, he walks into my classroom wearing his jacket, feeling successful, and he says, I found my jacket, there it is, we're good. And I said, great, so we can call the dogs off now, right? And then I said that, and in my head I'm like, what are you, like, you went to school for this, what are you, Because he looked at me for a minute and he goes, what dogs? Right? So then I spent the next 5 minutes explaining, like, there are not dogs running around the school looking for your jacket, right? So some individuals are very literal, right? So we need to be very literal in return. And then again, some individuals are very visual as well. So I alluded to this last night. That group downstairs that did that, the basketball soccer. You had a great name for it. Who did the basketball soccer dribbling thing?
Oh, triple dribble.
Triple dribble. Man, that's going to suit the nation. Triple dribble, right? So I love that you guys made a point about, well, we're going to visually show you how to do triple dribble first, right? Because a lot of individuals with and without disabilities are very kind of spatially and visually inclined. So I alluded to this last night, and there's something in teaching called I do, we do, you do, right? So the best instructional practices talk about you demonstrating something first, and then all of us doing it together, and then you can do it after that, right? I do, we do, you do. That's an example of kind of scaffolding your instruction, right? So another example of that, another example of me being a bad teacher, would be back when I was teaching my kids money math, we would do money math inside the classroom, just on pieces of paper, right? So on a piece of paper it'd say, you just paid for an item that was $3.99. How much money should you give the clerk? And people would write down $4. It was great, right? And then we'd go out in the community and go into the grocery stores, and my kids would just freeze and have no idea what to do, right? And it's because of the struggle of generalizing skills, right? Some individuals with disabilities struggle with generalizing skills across multiple settings. So they could do it inside of my classroom, but we couldn't do it inside of the grocery store, right? So what we did is we scaffold the instruction. At first we did it inside the classroom. The end goal was doing it in a grocery store. So to scaffold it, we created our own grocery store inside of the classroom called Trader Brad's. And they would do the money math on the paper, then they would go back and they'd pick out their items, and then I actually bought a real cash register. So I had a student working the cash register, and they'd go and they'd pay for their items. And then we went out into the community and we nailed it, right? So scaffolding that instruction. Lastly, for many, it says children, but individuals, behavior is communication, right? So what we need to ask is, what is the function of this behavior, right? I think often, and I mean, you can probably agree, that often in our work, we might have some volunteers who are tired, who are frustrated, maybe, by some behaviors that they see. But what we need to start thinking about is what is this individual trying to tell me through this behavior, right? Maybe this is how they're communicating. Are they trying to seek access to materials, seek access or attention from peers or adults? Or maybe the opposite. Are they trying to escape something or avoid something, right? Maybe it's a sensory piece. Maybe the lights are overstimulating or something like that, right? So what is this behavior trying to tell me? This cartoon, if you can't read it, says, it's all fun and games until someone figures out the function of your behavior. One of my favorite ones. Okay, I'm going to, what do you think, like 5-ish minutes, you think? Go for it. Okay, all right, fine. My wife usually gives me like 3 minutes to talk, so this is great. All right, alternate modes of communication. So, there are a couple, so some students may be verbally communicating, right? It's just not going to work. And so there are alternate modes of communication. There's one thing called PECS, which stands for Picture Exchange Communication System, right? That sounds fancy, but it's actually pretty simple to create. Okay, so that's just putting pictures and icons on different things around your ministries, around your rooms, around the hallways. And so when an individual, maybe you want to know if the individual wants to play basketball, or maybe they want to color. So you have a picture of a basketball. Thank you. There's the visual, and a picture of a coloring book, and then you can bring both of them to the individual and say which one, and then they pick. Right, that's the exchange part. Choices, so using hands, so providing an individual with choices. So in Everybody Athletics, that exercise program we do, we have 2 individuals that use chairs, and they use eye gazing as well. So they use eye gazing for communication. So we will give them, do you want to do this, do you want to do that? We do a lot of conversation starters in Everybody Athletics, and so a lot of our questions are turned to, do you like this or do you like that? And then we narrow things down. So what we do is you hold their hands out, and you give 2 choices, and then the individual looks at one, right? And that's the answer, right? And you keep moving on from there. So eye gazing. Using yes or no questions, as simple as it sounds, yes or no's can be a great alternative modes of communication. And some individuals might come with their own assistive technology. So they might use an iPad for communication or things like that. Oh, here's an example of text right here. I want, and then there's pictures of all those. I forgot that I put that in there. I guess I'm all right. All right. Another example of alternative modes of communication that I don't recommend. This is Katrina, and I did mention One Direction. There's this week where Katrina stopped talking. No idea why she stopped talking. We later found out why. It was some home stuff. But she wasn't responsive to anything, wasn't doing anything. So I didn't know why she wasn't talking, but what I did know is that for $39.99 you could buy a life-size cutout of Harry Styles on Amazon Prime, and it would come in 2 days. And so we bought this cutout, and I think that says, Katrina, will you read your spelling words to me, love Harry Styles? She did all of her work that day, right? So just getting creative in our alternate modes of communication. All right, I'm going to go through these ones a little bit quicker. Structure and differentiation. So thinking about the way that we're structuring our ministries can be important, right? Thinking about making sure that we have large group interactions can be important because it gives everybody the opportunity to participate in a large group. If we're talking about kids specifically, we don't really know what their 5 days a week looks like in school. Maybe sometimes they're in the mainstream classroom, maybe sometimes they're pulled out, right? But by us providing large group opportunities, that provides everybody with the opportunity to participate in a large group. Small groups, so also breaking things down into smaller groups can be helpful as well. You can even break it up by ability level. So an example that we give is, again, going back to the kids, even though this works for everybody, going back to the kids, you think about Sunday school, you think about having craft time at one station, you think about having story time at the other station, and then having 2 different groups, and maybe sharing the story, and you're sharing the same story, and doing the same craft, but maybe you're presenting it a little bit differently each time, right? The groups don't know it, right? Because they're swapped, they're in different spots, they don't know it, but maybe you're presenting it a little bit differently, but it's the same story. And then again, individuals as well. Sometimes we provide one-on-one assistance and focus. So the one-on-one buddy system, right? A lot of churches are starting the one-on-one buddy system, which is so great, right? So it's having an individual, generally high school and above, it kind of depends on the church, that's willing to be there with a child who might need a little extra support inside of the classroom, right? So it can be an adult, or as a classroom teacher, you can think about it being a model child, right? So just being really strategic in where you're going to sit Timmy, because you know that Johnny always does a really good job. So you're going to have Timmy always partnered with Johnny or sit with Johnny. Now you're not telling Johnny, hey Johnny, you're the model child, right? He doesn't need to know that, right? But just by Timmy sitting with Johnny, there's that influence there. So when you think about the structure of our ministries, you need to think about our environment, right? So considering sensory needs, because some individuals individually with disabilities, some without, have sensory needs around noises, have sensory needs around lights, smells. You also need to consider physical layout as well, right? So consider the mobility of things, right? So, you know, I like how we got a row here, we got people that, and then I think there's enough-ish room in the back, right? But just thinking about making sure there's enough space for everybody to get around, right? Kind of the opposite, the room within a room, room within a room, and it again is more for sensory pieces. I visited the Sunday school classroom, and they did such a good job. It was the classroom, and then in the corner here they had like 3 chairs situated with a bunch of kids' books. And those 3 chairs were situated in a way that if you sat inside it felt really safe. It felt like it was a separate room almost, right? But it was still in the regular classroom. And it was totally normal for any kid to go over there and just take a quick break and read some books, right? That room within the room idea was really great. Sometimes you need to consider exits with kids that are runners. All right, moving on. Pacing. So pacing, the tendency, like tonight, right now, is to want to be go, go, go all the time, right? So especially with respite night, right? So, you know, with respite night, you get kids once a month, and you just want to run them through everything, all these exciting things. And that can be fun, but a go, go, go pacing of things is not preferred for children or adults with calmer affects, obviously, right? Ask them to go, 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 and they're a little more steady. It's not preferred for individuals who are easily overly stimulated, obviously, right? Because go, go, go is a lot of action, a lot of movement. But the thing that's kind of counterintuitive, but research-based, is that it's not even preferred for individuals who have a go, go, go affect as well, right? Because where we think, oh, we're going to go, go, go and run them out, they're actually going to start ramping up a bit, right? So if you take the respite night as an example, parents drop their kids off who are super energetic, then they go off on a date, and they come back, and they're picking up kids that are more energetic. Good luck, church, right? All right, intake forms. And so, Elisha Foundation, we do these trainings. We provide sample intake forms for families, right? So that's a form that you would give any kid with or without disability, youth with or without disability, anybody joining your ministry with or without disabilities. It just kind of helps you you know, just tell me a little bit about your child. Tell me a little about your youth, right? So we have examples of that. But I don't have it with me tonight. But bottom line is it's all about communication and talking with parents, right? I think oftentimes there can kind of be this hesitation for the church, right, to ask questions, right? Maybe they think that's offensive. I don't know. Maybe they're scared about it, right? I understand that hesitation. But I'll tell you, number one, the survey that we talked about a little bit ago of hospitality, that was the number one thing that parents said. Ask questions, right? Ask questions. Ask about the supports they can provide, right? Parents want it, right? It shows that you are interested in making it work at this church, that they belong at this church. But number two, this is not the first time that parents have had this question asked, right? This is kind of, I mean, 5 days a week at school, these are the conversations that they have. So it's not the first time that they've had that conversation. So some churches ask us, what if we have, you know, we have this extra space, how can we use it, right? So if space allows, sensory rooms can be helpful. I took a peek in that sensory. Did you make that too?
I brought it with Jennifer
and loved it. That was great. So we have a sensory room here, right? So great for some individuals who need a sensory break. With the idea that it's a short break, because the ultimate goal is that they return with everybody else, right? Separately, a break room, right? So the opposite, a good idea for people who might need a break from sensory pieces, right? Again, great idea, as long as it's a short break so they can return to the room. This is an example. The caption says, create these rooms or they'll be created for you. This is a student of mine who had a routine where at 2:30, he would always go into a different room for a break with his assistant, and he would go on the computer, and it was 2:32, and the assistant was talking to me about things, and then she was done talking about things, and we turned around, and we couldn't find him, and he made his own break room in the island in our classroom, which is really creative. It happened 2 weeks later. I didn't get a picture of it. It happened 2 weeks later, but he made a break room in the big recycling room that we had in the classroom, too. He was really creative. All right, differentiation. So what works for one person might not work for others, right? So that's both between people with and without disabilities as well as across disabilities. And it's really all about just meeting the person where they're at. Now this doesn't mean, this is what we did yesterday to a T, right? This doesn't mean that we can't do an activity that would single a person out, but it just means that we need to plan accommodations or modifications in advance. I'm not going to read through these for two reasons. Number one, you guys nailed it last night. You guys did a great job providing simple yet effective accommodations and modifications so everybody can play the game. Number two, if you Google accommodations and modifications, it's going to pop up everywhere. Because as a special ed teacher, like, we're mandated, we have to provide these accommodations and modifications. So there's examples everywhere. Okay, a couple more, and then we're just going to speed through the done. When you're thinking about differentiation, there's something in research-based teaching strategy called OTR, increased opportunities to respond. So during our training, we talk a lot about Down syndrome, we talk a lot about autism, cerebral palsy, we talk a lot about emotional behavior disorder as well, and certain behaviors that come out of that, right? And so what OTR says is it's providing a significant number of occasions to respond to questions during lesson or activity. So the idea is if you have an individual who exhibits a lot of behaviors, maybe shouts at a turn, maybe can't sit still at certain times, then giving them an increased opportunity to participate in the lesson is actually beneficial. Now this can be counterintuitive, right? Because the first question we usually get is, so this kid who keeps saying inappropriate things at a turn, I'm going to give him more chances to say things. That's what you're telling me, right? Yes, it is. Because research-based, this is what it does. Number one, it allows for the child's active participation in class, right? Number two, it provides you for more time to provide positive reinforcement. Also positive reinforcement, right? Maybe they don't get the answer right. Maybe it's half right, but I can still praise that half answer right. Maybe they got the answer completely wrong, but they used a good volume in their voice. I can praise the volume of their voice. Maybe they sat still the whole time. I can praise that. So it gives you the opportunity to build that rapport and get to that 4-to-1 praise model by providing positive reinforcement. It also gives that child an increased responsibility, right? I'm the one that answers these questions. I'm the one that passes out this material, right? Increased responsibility. And also gives that individual less time to participate in disruptive behavior, right? They don't have time to participate in this disruptive behavior if they're answering questions. If they know, oh, Brad's gonna call me, I really gotta focus here, right? Skipping this, finishes the time. Skipping that. We did a dinosaur day, it was super fun, ask me later. All right, consistency. So having consistency within your expectations that you have for individuals helps prevent this level of discomfort that we're talking about, right? Because individuals with disabilities and a lot of individuals without, I was a high school teacher, a high school special ed teacher, so I taught kids with and without disabilities. We'd see this across the board. Would be difficulty with code switching, right? So what's okay in this environment or with this individual is not okay with this individual, right? So struggles with that. So just make sure that you have consistent expectations is important. This might be one of the last things I touch on tonight before we move on. So all of these strategies that we talk about are proactive strategies. So the entire purpose of the training is it's proactive, right? It's seeing the individual first, understanding their strengths, understanding their needs, and then how can we be proactive in meeting these needs and helping them be successful, right? Feel successful. Again, best laid plans. Sometimes these practice strategies don't work. Sometimes there can be escalation, right? Which is a very common question that we get as well. So what do we do during these times of escalations? So number one, when the individual's affect ramps up, ours needs to wind down, right? And that can be kind of, again, counterintuitive, kind of tough to do in a tough situation, right? But if an individual's affect is ramping up, ours needs to wind down. There's a couple reasons behind that. Number one, it very, very visually shows the individual where they need to be, right? If they're up here and you're staying here, then it shows them I need to model that behavior and that's where I need to be. Number two, if my affect is winding down and I start talking quieter, and that person has to kind of stop what they're doing for a second to lean in and understand what I'm trying to say, right? Even if it's momentary, that person still needs to stop, right? And kind of listen a little bit harder, right? So that's why our affect needs to wind down as well. Asking what the individual wants, right? Or how you can help them, right? So instead of just going into just fix-it mode and I'm going to do this, asking the individual. Maybe they can tell you what's concerning them, right? Providing choices can be examples. So providing 2 to 3 acceptable choices. So there are a couple different reasons behind that, and we don't have enough time to get into the whole purpose of the choices and self-determination. But the examples of that would be, if I have a child, let's just say I have a child who's 10, laying on the ground, kicking and screaming, kicking their arms, kicking their feet, I'm going to give the choices. Hey, do you want to go get a drink? Or do you want to go take a lap around the playground, right? Those are two choices that would probably help that individual calm down. And I'm still controlling the environment. I'm giving them choices, which is important, and they feel like they have a say in this, but I'm still controlling the environment. I'm not saying, hey, do you want to go get a drink or do you want to go drive off in my car, right? Not giving them that choice. I'm still controlling the environment. So thinking about PBIS and providing replacement behaviors is important during that time as well. And being very concrete and concise about it too. So again, using that individual who's 10, kicking their arms and legs, I'm going to start with just one thing at a time. I'm going to just focus on the legs. And I'm going to give that think about framing things in the positive. I'm going to say, hey, can I see some quiet legs, please? And then stop right there, right? So instead of saying not kicking, I'm just like, hey, can I see some quiet legs or calm legs or whatever kind of communication you guys use in the classroom, and then wait. I'll tell you, the first time you say that, you're going to see even more intense legs, right? That's okay. Just wait a little bit, and then again, can I see some quiet legs? And once you see it, then you move on to the arms maybe. Hey, can I see arms at your side? Wait. Again, first it's going to be flailing even more, and then it's, can I see arms at your side, please? Wait a little bit. Again, concise and concrete. Can I see arms at your side? Might have to do it for a while. Then you'll see it, right? And then you can move on from there, right? And again, celebrating small successes and being compliant is important. So maybe that kid is screaming, right? Maybe the kid is screaming. That kid's going to need to take a breath eventually, right? So when they take that breath to stop screaming, thank you so much for using a quiet voice. That was so great. Thank you so much, right? Celebrate that small success. I can provide them that praise, show them exactly what I need to see, and then eventually that'll happen. Verbal direction is more essentially. Maintaining normalcy inside the classroom, right? So, it can be this really common thing if maybe there is a meltdown going on to have a bunch of teachers rush, a bunch of students looking, right? But just about maintaining normalcy inside the classroom. So I shared with a couple, at Corbin University a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember what the question was, but I just mentioned the importance of normalcy in what I noticed inside of the classrooms that I taught at. So I mainly had my own classroom, but one period a day I would go and I would support my kids in Gen Ed social studies. And in that classroom it was amazing because one of my kids did have some behaviors, and when they happened, everybody else just did social studies, right? Because that's Jake, and when he gets frustrated, that's what he does, right? When I get frustrated, it looks different, right? That's just frustration. That's what we do, right? So maintaining normalcy inside the classroom is important. Okay. Participation is important. I'm just going to tell you this story, just because it's great. So as a teacher, you're not supposed to have favorite students, but we all have favorite students. This is Bryce. He's my favorite student. Chris knows Bryce. There we go. So,
It's one of his favorite people.
See, there we go. Everybody's favorite, right? You know I can guarantee he's my favorite student because he's the only student I ever gave my phone number to. Mistake, though, because he calls me like 15 times a day. But, in fact, like I said that in the training a couple days ago, or a couple weeks ago, and then I held my phone because Bryce called me, like during the training. But one of my favorite students, Bryce, was a very friendly guy. I had a guy in my classroom named Zach, not as friendly. I loved him so much. Like one of my first days with him, he said, I hate high school kids. And I was like, Zach, you're a sophomore in high school. Like, you are a kid. You get that, right? Like, he's going to make such a good, just old man, like, hosing the kids off his lawn. Right? Zach and Bryce didn't get along too well, and so I made sure they sat on opposite sides of the room, right? Being proactive. One morning, I think I was late. I had a meeting in the morning, came in late, just came in with my head down, put my head up, saw that Bryce had snuck right next to Zach. Didn't think much of it because I was just late, just started my math lesson. All of a sudden, I heard a harmonica play in my classroom, a harmonica. And I looked up, and Bryce was playing a harmonica about an inch away from Zach's face. So I said the sentence I thought I would never say as a teacher, Bryce, please put your harmonica away. And he did. Got back to teaching. 2 minutes later, you guys remember those recorders from like 5th grade? Yeah. All of a sudden, the hot cross bun starts playing. And I look, and Bryce is playing his recorder right in front of Zach. And Zach is just, I'm like, Bryce, please put your recorder away. Go back to teach my lesson. 2 minutes later, you guys remember that commercial where the easy button, and you hit it and it goes, that was easy, that starts going off in my classroom. Bryce has that button, and he's hitting it right next to Zach. I'm like, Bryce, how did you sneak this past your parents? Like, I'm not even mad. That's impressive that you stuck all this in your backpack without your parents seeing it, right? So I think there's some lesson about consistency and anticipation, but I skipped all those slides. Anyway, that's a great story. All right, moving on. Last story. So fun. This is, okay, all this is research-based. All of this is research-based, and so is this. There's nothing more enjoyable and fellowship with individuals with disabilities. So seeking the Lord, showing love, seeing the individual first, and following these top 5 lists will create a fun environment for everyone. I do want to leave you with there are 4 super good books. I mean, there are a lot of good books on disability and the gospel. These 4, though, come highly recommended. Greg Lucas is actually one of our main speakers at our retreats, and they're super good. I'm going to leave them up there for like a quick second for you. Quick minute. Yeah.
A quick minute.
I kind of want to jump into these pictures. Like now I feel more like a celebrity. I'm wearing this microphone. People are holding their phones up. Oh man.
I should take a picture.
Autograph session afterwards. If anybody.
Yay!
Yeah. All right. So that was the really quick version. Like I said, this is what the Elisha Foundation does. So we do these retreats with churches, and we also do these trainings with churches that are a little bit longer, more content, less fast. But we just want to support churches in their work to make things more inclusive as best we can. So if you do have any questions that come up, then my card is back there, and so for sure. So there you go. Thank you very much.